From Dubai, everyone, under the high patronage of His Highness Sheikh Ahmed Al Maktoum, my dear Chairman, Sir Anthony Ritossa, is very pleased to host the Ritossa Family Office virtual keynote panel number 3. The panel theme of today is Spotlight on Investing in Startups. Before I introduce you to our dear chairman of today, I would like to just say a very big welcome and hello to Mohammed Al-Ali, who is our distinguished Grand Ambassador for the Ritossa Global Family Office Summits. He is also the CEO and advisor to Sheikh Ahmed Al Maktoum International Investments Enterprise UAE. So Mohammed Al-Ali, thank you so much for being here among us. And now I would just like to introduce Hussein Saeed, CFA, who is our summit chairman and master of ceremonies at our conferences. He is also obviously our moderator for today. Hussein is also the CNBC Arabia anchor and chief market strategist at FXTM in the UAE. Hussein, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa, and for all the distinguished panelists for joining us today. It is with a great pleasure that I'll be moderating this session and put the spotlight on startups, which, of course, we all know they are the key drivers of our economies nowadays. So first, I would hope that you and your families, your beloved ones, remain safe and unaffected by this pandemic we have at hand. We know the coronavirus has been affecting businesses from all sizes, but it is affecting startups particularly hard. So until the health crisis is over, it seems survival has to be the imperative focus for most. It is evident now that VC deals have contracted significantly. We've seen this first in China and then throughout Europe and then in the US. And considering the fact that startups has become the #1 engine in growth in our modern economies, we certainly believe that they should get access to resources. Probably it is time for our global startup community also to come all together, support and learn from each other. This panel today is put together to highlight all these challenges that startups are facing now. How can they access funding? We'll provide some survival tips from the key experts we have on this panel, and where to capture medium to long-term investment opportunities for family offices, for VCs, and whether we are going to see more involvement as well from family offices in supporting the startups. So thank you all again for joining us. I will not give introductions for each one of you. I think we have limited time. And given the limited time as well, I would like to start with the only lady we have on this panel, Najla. Najla, a couple of days ago, I heard a quote from Scott McNally. He's the guy who co-founded Sun Microsystems, and then he sold it out to Oracle for $7.4 billion. He said that in the wake of the financial crisis, he said that the highest unemployment since the Great Depression makes it an optimal time to start a company. Do you agree?
First of all, thank you to the Ritossa Family Office for hosting this talk, and thank you all for being here. And as you said, I hope everyone is healthy and well. Do I agree that this is a time of great opportunity? Yes, absolutely. Not to obviously belittle the extent and the severity of the crisis that we're living through, but having been through previous, I think we've all here been through previous economic recessions. We know that some of the most interesting and successful startups often come out of these market dislocations. And, if you look at the most recent financial crisis, 2008, 2009, 2010, companies like Dropbox, Uber, Netflix, many of them were founded during that era. So yes, I do think there is absolutely an opportunity there. Is it right for everyone? That's a different question. I'm actually reading a book at the moment by Jacqueline Novogratz, founder and CEO of Acumen. And in that book, there is this quote, which is basically, go where your deepest yearning meets the world's greatest needs. So I think one thing that we know right now is that the world has many great needs, right? In areas like healthcare, in areas like education, in areas like food, there is no shortage of problems, big problems to solve. Moreover, that's happening against the backdrop of an accelerated adoption of technology. I mean, in many of these sectors, we didn't think that they would get disrupted for the next 3 to 5 years, have overnight really become disrupted. So you have that, adoption of technology, you have big problems to solve. And ultimately, you have folks that are losing jobs and may find it difficult to find jobs. And ultimately, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So when you think about it, in a sense, it is the perfect storm, right? It's a perfect confluence of factors coming together. But ultimately, entrepreneurship, the reality is, having been in the ecosystem, entrepreneurship is not necessarily the right path for everyone. And so I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out there and be an entrepreneur, but I do believe 100% that we are going to see the next generation of entrepreneurs rise from the ashes of this crisis and really lead us into the future and help shape the future of the world that we're going to live in.
Fantastic, Najla. Let me move to Tim. Tim, I mean, you have funded the biggest companies probably in our era. You have funded Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, SpaceX, Robinhood, and more than 500 other tech companies in over 2 decades. So I think you have been through at least 2 or 3 big financial crises. Does this one look to you any different?
Yes and no. Each financial crisis brought a new wave of great technology and great industry transformations. When the .com bubble burst, that was the beginning. That was the opening for Amazon and for Google and for a lot of great companies that came out of that crisis. The financial crisis that came in 2008 was the impetus for Bitcoin and for a variety of new fintech and decentralized financial companies that have all sort of come out of that crisis. This is a crisis of healthcare, but it's also a crisis of travel and of employment. From there, I think there will be incredible entrepreneurs that will take us to a new place in travel, whether that travel is virtual travel or real travel. It'll take us to a new place for employment, where a new gig economy maybe, or some new place that it takes us in that way. And I think it'll take us to a new place in healthcare where we have learned from this crisis that, and a lot of the companies we were backing in healthcare were data driven. And it turns out that the dry labs are much more effective than the wet labs in getting these things, these new drugs moving. And the dry labs are just using data. So they use computational biology and chemistry to determine if you've got a disease up here. You run many simulations in a dry lab, and then you see one that hooks, and then you can test it in the wet lab. That for therapeutics is going to change everything. And then for diagnostics, I think things are going to change in a big way, because people are able to use data and it's more effective than the doctor is in determining a diagnosis or a treatment for individual. I also think that during this crisis, we've been stuck in place. What that has done is it has accelerated a few consumer issues where usually it takes a while for the early adopters to come on board, and then the and then there's the chasm that gets hopped, and then you have the rest of the population starts using these new technologies. Well, when you're stuck in place, you start experimenting, and so people are experimenting with VR or creating their own Bitcoin wallets, so that the early adopters were there. They were pushing for these new technologies, but all of a sudden the chasm got smashed together, and we're all early adopters now. We're all jumping into these new technologies. And in my portfolio, I have seen companies go in one of two directions. One direction is they say, you know, our entire business has gone to zero. And in the other half of the portfolio, the company is saying, we can't believe how fast people are adapting our new technology. And so we're seeing the world move forward faster because of this crisis, or we're getting a window into what the world can look like down the road. And then once we're all back to normal, we can we will be that much further advanced. Now, and every crisis creates an opportunity, and for venture capital and entrepreneurship, this is an amazing opportunity. You have in the travel industry, there are a whole bunch of unemployed, but some of those are machine learning experts and artificial intelligence experts and people who can sort of transform an economy. Well, we can grab those, and they will be the ones who employ the rest of the population through this next big wave. So yeah, I would agree with Scott McNeely. I usually do, actually. And I would say this is a major opportunity, a major crisis, and I think it's going to be incredibly good for some of our extraordinary new technologies. And I think that we can kind of go in one of two directions now from a governance standpoint. It can either go dystopian, where the government tells everybody exactly what they're supposed to do and we all become sheep, or it can go utopian, where the government recognizes that we are all one world and it's one big open world. The geographic borders start to fall. We do more trade with each other, and the global economy and the quality of a human life continues to grow at an extraordinary rate. So we are at a major fork in the road. This is a very exciting time to be a venture capitalist. I'm thrilled to be, putting my money to work. I'm thrilled to be putting my investors' money to work at a time where it means so much.
Yes, Tim, I'll get back to you on Draper Associates now, especially as I mentioned that VC's deals have contracted significantly over the past 2 or 3 months. Let me move to Fiorenzo. Fiorenzo, Tim just mentioned about the birth of blockchain and Bitcoin after the great financial crisis back in 2008. And you're involved a lot in Bitcoin firms. Tell me now, are you seeing any appetite investing in these big blockchain startups?
Yes. So thank you for your question, Hussein. This was very interesting. So my view is quite simple. I think that today this will be the crypto year. If you compare what has been done into the blockchain industry, when we talk about blockchain application, the amount of funding for blockchain application in the corporate space is very low compared, to the amount of funding that went inside the crypto solution or Bitcoin based solution. So my view is quite simple, is that we are now building a clear infrastructure that we will be able to use in our financial system to store and to basically transact in Bitcoin also as a means of payment in an easier way. So this was not the case during, the first crypto rush. Now we have the infrastructure. And in fact, nevertheless, this current crisis, we had many of the crypto infrastructure company that were able to raise and secure a high amount of funding. That happened especially in Switzerland. We had some major financing rounds for crypto banks. So the idea is now that Bitcoin, is entering in a real institutional phase. Before was a real C2C play, many young millennials playing between them. Then we have, this wave of ICO. But now I think it's really the space, especially if you've seen the halving process happening. And, with all the monetary policies going around, I think that there is a real play for Bitcoin, and especially, for all blockchain startup that are willing to enter into the infrastructure related application of the blockchain. For all the, I would say, all the application related to, healthcare, supply chain, obviously, the current crisis made it even more appealing. And what I also would suggest as an advice for all blockchain startup is really to consider crypto lending. So today we have the ability to lend against Bitcoin, and especially what happened in the last few months, early stage startup, they struggled completely to finance themselves. So you had a lot of early stage startups struggling to get money. And a way for them to get additional fundings could be also to consider crypto lending solution, which means basically lend against Bitcoin some money in order to continue their business.
Yep, thank you, Firenze. I'll get back to you as with the most now wanted applications in the blockchain tech. Sultan, let me move to you now. And Rilam, as I remember, it was only founded a couple of years ago, I think back in 2018. And you already have invested in several companies now. Can you tell me more about where these investments have been and how these companies are navigating the current crisis?
Basically, I just want to add something. I entered into investment in 2012. So I have two investment companies. One is international and one is a national company. So I started in 2012 with Volt Investments, and most of my investments is into technology due to the fact I'm coming from a technology background. What's happening now, I think it's a huge shift in the investment field when it comes to technology. So our investment is seeing a bit of corrections and a bit of changes to cope with what's happening in the market now. Yes, we've delayed some of the investment and we prioritized the others due to the market needs. We see now more opportunities in technology, especially in the Middle East and Vietnam. And recently we focused more into consumer-based technologies to serve the human needs, especially after what happened with the lockdown and the need of all the delivery or services applications to serve the communities around the globe. So basically, this was the changes we've done. We've invested recently in 4 technologies. We're looking at 4 more. We are investing now in a company called Herbs and More in Vietnam. It's a platform that looks at providing herbal supplements to an online portal. We invested recently in an application in the UAE called Fulus. It's a payment service provider. It will be a merchant-based technology focusing on SMEs. We saw the advantages in this platform due to the fact that they're focusing on merchants rather than consumers, which adds a lot of value to the economy. While if you look at the economy in the United Arab Emirates or in the world, SME has a very bad experience when it comes to banking services. So Flus comes with this add-on to these SMEs, providing them all the banking services that they need in a one-stop shop. We are also investing in a chatbot in Vietnam. This chatbot will be focusing on professional chatting services rather than the normal WhatsApp services. So it will be providing professionals on a platform where you can exchange your ideas, you can ask questions, you can get consultancies on this platform. I'd like to add a point. What's happening now for me as an investor is an advantage, as I see it as a correction in the economy. What's happening in the world now is not a crisis. It's, for an investor, it's a correction. The world needed a correction now to get new unicorns, to get new startups raised. You know, once you reach to a point, you need to have a new blood coming to the market to change the market to cope with the youth growth. So I think this is a correction. There is a lot of opportunities, and I'm willing to invest more and more into technology when it comes to technologies that copes with the changes in the whole world now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Focus more as well on the companies that we might be interested in the future. Abdulrahman, let me move to you. So Sultan said what he's seeing now is a correction, and this would be good for VCs. I think the Saudi Public Investment Fund saw it as an opportunity, and both like they invested around more than $9 billion last quarter. So tell me about your appetite as a VC.
Hussein, I believe this time is quite an interesting time for venture capital. Not commenting too much about the PIF investment spree, as I believe their investment and investment analyst capabilities far more greater than mine to even disclose or discuss any kind of their investment. Although I believe this time is quite interesting time to look for more international opportunity or even through local opportunities. Speaking from our firm, from the VC's perspective, we are looking at the MENA region currently in a different eye or in a different way. What we are seeing right now from the consumers, there is a huge shift in consumer behaviors and adaptation of far more greater way to different technologies. For example, 5 years ago, if we talked about remote working or remote working culture, this is an idea that will be dismissed at seconds. Currently, it's the preferable way, and most corporates is actually adapting it in a let's say much systematic and very clear and productive way. Another method or another industry that have been affected positively about the current situation or the current crisis is fintech. I believe most of the GCC government have been trying to push toward cashless economy for the past couple of years now. Yet it had faced slow adaptation from the citizens. Yet currently with the current coronavirus pandemic, cashless startups and cashless society is the new method or new way that people even prefer to do. Let's say as Dal, we have been evaluating many startups in this pandemic. Sure, let's say the coronavirus is coronavirus time is abnormal time, and I believe most VCs or most investors have been sitting back for a little bit to let's say surpass the gray area that we were in the past couple of months. Currently, I believe that we surpassed that. We know where we are, where we are going, and which companies are adopting and which economies are, let's say, gaining shapes once again. Currently, we are trying and actively searching and looking for a new startup that will have a great business model that's quite adaptable to the current situation and the future situation as well. I agree with what Tim and Sultan said about the future, and that it is quite exciting time for VC, and hopefully that 2020 will be much greater than a lot of people anticipated, at least from a VC and startup point of view.
Abdulrahman, let us move to Patrick and take his experience now, since we know that Hong Kong and China were very fast to control this pandemic compared now to other cities and countries. So Patrick, did this translate into more activities within the VCs?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hussein. I think the first thing to say is, China's always been very active in all kinds of spaces, especially technology. Unfortunately, this crisis for us, financiers and venture capitalists, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of my learned friends have just mentioned. We've seen a big drop of venture activity in China from the first quarter of this year, dropping by 30-35%. The deals have dropped maybe like 25%. But there's still a lot of activity in things like AI, robotics, supply chain, logistics, tech, entertainment. Food delivery in Hong Kong has gone up 30-35% month on month. Companies like Deliveroo, Food Panda, which have done extremely well. Most of us in Hong Kong, we haven't had a lockdown per se as a lot of the other countries. China's obviously been in big lockdown, but where entrepreneurs succeed is being able to face different challenges, and essentially they have to solve problems. And if you solve problems well and are able to scale them, then you're able to monetize. So this is just a time where no one knows when COVID will end, and that's part of the challenges. The startup appetite is where how can entrepreneurs last as long as they can to make sure that cash flow still comes in. From the investment standpoint, it's very difficult to probably attract startup capital unless you're calling up Tim all the time. But it's become more and more difficult. It's probably pushed back the timetable for entrepreneurs by 6 to 12 months before they can get to cash flow positive. But as we said earlier, all the companies that have done well, especially like the current Fortune 500, over half the companies were founded and created during bear markets or during recession. So we're bound to see a big collection of new companies coming up. And, unfortunately, from a financial standpoint, we're very excited to see what opportunities are ahead of us. And I think there's more and more bargain prices you can get later down in 2020 and probably more even so in 2021.
It's fantastic news, Patrick. Let me move to Abdullah. Abdullah, you're the only startup we have here on this panel, so it's very important to share your experience with us. I know that Fionca is Egypt's first all-female car hiring services. And we know now very well that transportation has been severely hit. So can you tell us how you're dealing with this situation?
To start with, thank you, Hussein, for your question. Moving on to the situation now, I think that startups had to be very quick in the way they adapted to the situation, how they're making sure that they're able to get past the problems that they're facing in their day-to-day operations. I think it was also, from Fionca's perspective, it was very important to streamline our operations and focus on our core service. So, for example, we were looking to expand into other transportation channels like scooters, in the future like motorcycles, and we were actually launching Fionca scooters in June this year. So what we had to do is we had to push back on these other new verticals and focus on our core service. I think it was also very important for us to make sure that we were able to cut our costs very fast and in a way that would make us manage our budget or manage our cash in a more efficient way that would last us to a longer period. I think also internally, something very important that you have to do is you have to make sure that you're clear with your team. You have to make sure that everyone is on the same boat, and that there is no kind of gray area, because this gray area, this uncertainty creates a lot of problems when you're coming into managing big problems or like the situation we're in today. I think it's also very, very important to communicate to your customers the situation. For example, what we did is we sent out an email to our customers explaining how the steps we're taking to tackle the COVID-19 problem. So, for example, we made sure that our customers are informed that all cars are sterilized, that all drivers will wear face masks. It also was important to, for example, communicate to them that the service might change a little. So, for example, our ETA was normally from 5 to 10 minutes. We had to communicate to our customers that a ride could take, for example, up to 20 minutes for the car to arrive. So all of these things made us adapt to the situation better and help us manage this crisis in a better way.
Thank you, Abdullah, for sharing this experience with us. I'll get back to you. Najla, if you can tell us, how did the Shira deal with the current pandemic? What I know is so far you have over than 100 startups being graduated from your programs. They raised more than $50 million in investments. Is there still appetite from Shira to invest?
Thank you, Hussein. So let me answer your first question, how we dealt with the pandemic. So obviously our first reaction was a human reaction, right? Ultimately, this is a pandemic. We need to make sure everyone is safe. And so our first few weeks really spent checking in on the team at Shira, but also our entrepreneurs, and just making sure everyone was okay and making sure we were there to provide any support that was required. And then once it became apparent that, you know, this crisis was going to be a lot bigger than we had initially anticipated, we knew we had to sort of put our resources to work. I mean, moments like these are really a defining moment for you know, entities like us who exist to support startups. This is really a test of that commitment. So the first support we provided was more along the lines of non-financial support. So what we did was we put out resources into the community in terms of articles. We put out office hours with mentors. We put out webinars. We continue to do webinars every Thursday with experts in different fields, whether it's, you know, marketing, fundraising, team culture, whatever it may be. And we created a Slack channel because obviously in the absence of a physical space right now, there's no place for these entrepreneurs to gather and share their thoughts. And so we created a Slack channel that has over 200 entrepreneurs and members of the ecosystem there. But obviously, it's not enough to stop at that non-financial support. Ultimately, a lot of startups are clearly struggling financially. And so we recently, a few weeks ago, announced a $1 million Startup Solidarity Fund to provide both to provide relief to entrepreneurs whose startups have been affected by COVID, but also to show that we continue to support. So you asked me, is there appetite in investment? We actually, by the way, do not invest in our startups. We give them grants. We do not take equity in the startups we support, but we do connect them into investors. But the funding we provide is grant funding. So this $1 million fund will be used to support existing entrepreneurs, like I said, who may have been impacted by COVID, or to support new entrepreneurs that may be working on solutions that either directly address this pandemic. You know, we've talked about a few of them, whether it's, you know, rapid testing or contact tracing or innovative PPE, whatever it may be. Or they're working on solutions in sectors that will be especially relevant in the post-COVID economy. Is there an appetite for investment? Coming back to your question, just generally from what we've seen with our entrepreneurs, you know, I'd say we did a survey and about 65% of them continue to fundraise, but the majority of them are struggling. So although I think we hear the language from investors that, you know, it's business as usual, I don't think that's necessarily true from what we are hearing from our startups. I think investors are understandably perhaps being a little bit more cautious, and any dry powder that they do have, they're using it to double down on their own startups that are currently in their portfolio and that are obviously emerging as winners, and not necessarily to invest in new startups. That said, I remain optimistic. I think the investment scene will bounce back, and I think you will in fact see more investors interested in this asset class and deploying more capital into venture capital. We talked about family offices. I think you'll see a lot of family offices now begin to get interested in investing in startups, primarily because they've seen that what it's like to get left behind when disruptions like COVID take place. And so I think they're realizing that entrepreneurship and innovation is now core to their business. And that does two things. I mean, one, it obviously increases the pool of the capital available to startups, but it also provides exit opportunities, because a lot of these corporates, traditional corporates or family businesses may actually be interested in acquiring startups as a way of integrating some of these innovations into their businesses. And that just generally, again, leads to a more virtuous cycle. So I think we have some interesting opportunities ahead. I think although investment may have slowed in the short term, and although investors may be a little bit more cautious right now, I do think that we are going to see a lot more interest in investing in startups.
Thank you, Najla, for this note. And yes, we hope we will see also much more involvement from family offices, and we're going to talk about this. Tim, so Najla mentioned that business is not really business as usual. Tell me about business now with Draper Associates. Is it as usual or not? And is there any sectors you're looking at, any opportunities? Tell me. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, because I felt for the last year or so that the markets were a little overheated, and so I advised all my portfolio companies to raise as much money as possible and not spend it, and most of them actually did do that. And so whereas in previous crises, I have spent a lot of my time doing triage, trying to figure out which companies to support and which not to. Fortunately, our portfolio, our existing portfolio, is in very strong position, so I can focus on these other new companies that are coming through. So we are very active right now, because you're getting Series A companies at seed pricing, and so companies can come in with $50 million valuations 4 months ago are now very happy to take a $20 million valuation. So I'm a little weird. I kind of love crises, and I look and I think, okay, well, what needs to be done? We have 36 million people unemployed in the U.S. I say, okay, how do I help solve that? We probably have 300 million around the world unemployed. I'm always thinking, wow, these are, when there's a big crisis, there's a big problem and a big opportunity to kind of run into the fire. And so that's sort of the way I look at it. I say, wow, it's a big crisis. It's a big opportunity. I'm ready to run into the fire. And so, and I believe that there were so many I've been a venture capitalist for a long time, and it was over the last 3 or 4 years we got flooded with venture capitalists. everyone became a venture capitalist because it's such an easy business. Well, now I think we're going to separate the wheat from the chaff, and the great venture capitalists are going to thrive in this movement going forward, and the ones who are kind of just kind of tourists, venture capital tourists, I think are going to be, you know, looking at all of the crisis they have to handle in their own portfolios, and they're not looking forward. Our whole business is looking forward. What does 2 years out look like? What does 4 years out look like? I have a company called Nantero that's 15 years in the making, and finally they've got these carbon nanotubes, and it's like going to change memory devices forever. We're always looking way out. How great will it be if we back this company? How great will the future be if we back this other company? And we're always kind of thinking, you know, whereas a lot of venture capitalists look at all the risks, we're saying, what if it works? How great can it be? What will the world look like? And then if that's a beautiful world, then we go after it. Because we're going to lose half our companies anyway. Our seed investments, half of them are going to go away. So the other half become really important, and a few of them really do transform industries. And we've had that happen. I mean, my gosh, in my 34-year career, I think we've had 35 seed investments that have become unicorns, and some of them are, you know, you mentioned household names and really are transforming industries. I mean, I think Hotmail and Skype made it so the whole world can communicate for free this way. I got to be in the first video call in the world. It was great fun. Way back when we did, they shut down 100,000 audio calls in order to get the bandwidth for one video call to work. But boy, things have made it, that was the entry to all of us being very close together. We can all see each other no matter who we are. And it's opened up the world in a way that I think the nation system, the tribal system is going to go away, and this global system of operation is going to be the wave for the next 10 to 20 years. And that includes decentralization, it includes Bitcoin, it includes smart contracts, it includes a lot of Zoom meetings. It includes education that is very much remote and online. There are a lot of new forms of consumer adoption that are accelerating right now, and this is a really good time. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk here. This is a great platform, and you guys have put on a great show, and so thank you for that.
And thank you, Tim, for sharing all these thoughts with us. It's always a great pleasure to have you on our panels. Fiorenzo, let me move again to you. And as we know, ICOs and STOs were thought to be great mechanisms to access capital. But what we have seen over the past couple of years with many scams, regulatory restrictions, this type of funding have probably declined. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Is this going to change anytime soon?
Yeah, I think all your points are correct. What you have seen is that, you know, if we compare 2019, we had around 3 billion in funding in blockchain investment related projects. And actually probably around 80–85% of them were equity round, okay? So we moved from, I would say, this way of raising money that was, you know, in the beginning, the way of ICO, STO, to more traditional venture capital angel investment round. I fully agree with Tim and the fact that, you know, I'm pretty sure that in 2020, this year, we will have probably 80–90% of the blockchain startup that will fail. The reason why they will fail is just because, they will lack of funding, and, probably, their solution was not advanced enough to reach, that venture capital stage that, that product that usually venture capital investors are looking at. I would also like to mention one point related to mining. I saw that was one point raised from a question in relation to mining. I would see three potential entry points into the Bitcoin blockchain space for this year. One is definitely mining. Why mining? Because, today we have chips that are so fast and so efficient that, we are not scared that, in 3 years or 4 years, we will need to replace them, because, the technology is so advanced that, those chips, even in 3 years, will be slightly more efficient by a little bit. So, today, if we can secure a very low electricity price on a long term with the PPA plan in countries like Canada or Norway, I would say it's a fantastic play to enter. Another thing is, I would say, is marketplace. So blockchain is really a fantastic tool for peer-to-peer transaction. And today we have great sectors that has not been yet digitalized. I'm thinking of agriculture. So agriculture is a 7 trillion industry, is the largest industry in the world. And today we have no mechanism of digitalization in this business. We can see now happening some marketplace that actually allow buyer and seller of agricultural products to connect. So for example, this is a great blockchain application. We can see international payments. So as you can see, as you know, many banks are now implementing blockchain solution, blockchain payment. Why? Imagine that, today running with the SWIFT, it requires a couple of days to get a payment to the recipient. That's a waste of time for our economy, because if that payment would have reached immediately, those money would be easily available to do other transactions. That would create a mechanism of growth for our economy, which is quite impressive. So I would say this year, definitely focusing on large industry like agricultural, logistics, and probably pharmacy. And I will also look at mining as well as an interesting entry point.
Thank you, Fiorenzo. And I think Tim agrees a lot with you on this aspect, especially with the crypto systems that we have now. Sultan, let me move again to you. And I know that you have been in the public sector as well before joining the private sector. So you've been on doing both jobs, the private and the public. But if you can tell me, we know that we have so many initiatives now from the government here in the UAE, from the central bank as well, to be able to provide the support needed for businesses. Is there any programs or initiatives that you think the governments need to take in order to help the startups survive this pandemic?
Actually, the government, we thank the government for whatever they've done now. All the governments in the world, they're trying to support the economies, and it was clear across the globe. What I see now is the whole system of registering the companies, easing the processes, the fees of the starting the companies, supporting them in getting bank facilities is a must for SMEs. SMEs are facing a lot of problems now when it comes to getting a bank account. It takes them from 1 month to 45 days to have a bank account. It goes through a long process, which is ridiculous. So basically, the most important thing is to create a framework that will be like a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs and SMEs to finalize everything in a matter of hours or a day. When you come to the normal businesses, you can finalize a trade license in 1 hour or in 5 minutes. But when it comes to an SME, he goes through a lot of processes. Yes, he gets the license, but he has a lot of obstacles when it comes to having his bank account, when it comes to get facilities or rates from the banks. So this environment need to be relooked from various angles, relooked from the Union of Banks, not the central bank, because the central bank is a regulator, but the union of banks is the main player. The union of banks is who decides what to do and when to do it. So the union should take an action focusing on this sector. This sector is also need to be supported by VCs. I'm seeing here the government is doing a great job supporting SMEs by funding them and giving them loans, giving them facilities to boost up their businesses. But I'm seeing a shortage in VCs due to the fact that the regulations does not support a lot VCs in certain activities where they can come and invest and manage their investments with these entrepreneurs. So I think it's both ways: fix the regulations for SMEs and also enhance the regulations when it comes to VCs and investment of private VCs into the economy. This will create a boost. This is in Dubai. Internationally, I'm seeing that the whole world is supporting SMEs due to the fact that SMEs are they're more than 70% of any economy. So if the SMEs goes down, the whole economy will be in a disaster. It will be a huge clash. So this is my point of view. Other than that, I think opening new channels of investments like crowdfunding in the UAE will help a lot. Starting virtual banks will help a lot. I'm talking now not in the free zones area, I'm talking in the mainland. So mainland should have virtual banks. You know, most of the SMEs, they don't need to have to visit a bank or to have a checkbook or whatever. They need an account and a banking facility, even if it's online. So virtual account and the virtual banking is very important, and I think it's time to have virtual banks in the UAE.
Thank you, Sultan. Abdurrahman, let me move again to you. And we know that so many governments are trying to help out, but sometimes, I mean, as we see in the region here, due to weaker oil prices and fiscal pressure, the government in Saudi decided to raise its VAT. So how does this move impact startups in your country? And if there's any programs as well that you think must be put to offset this kind of challenges, what should it be?
Right. Well, the Saudi Arabians have been giving special care and focus for SMEs for quite a while now. They have done multiple initiatives that could support SMEs, starting from Munshuat, SVC, just to name a few. We had the pleasure to meet the leading teams of both entities, and both entities seem very passionate and to assist these SMEs to reach different levels. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Saudi Arabia government have done quite an exponential job of, let's say, trying to minimize the effects of the pandemic on the SMEs. Some initiatives such as covering 60% of salaries that putting off work for 3 months at least. Should the VAT or the VAT 15% of VAT could be a little bit harder for some SMEs. But what we're looking at is in these times, even government have their own issues regarding their economy, regarding their cash reserve and different issues. And as the Minister of CMA have mentioned, that there will be certain action or let's say a little bit harsh action need to be taken, but it's ultimate for the population of Saudi Arabia and the continuance of the organization and the team. I believe that there should be some kind of program or of government, let's say, more governmental aid regarding certain level of SMEs, SMEs that have been affected, that operate, let's say, in vertical or industries that have been more affected negatively than others. It should have been or provided with, let's say, different conditions and a little bit easier processes regarding their operation. Yet I believe the current situation will, inshallah, be better in the next couple of months. The 15% probably will stay. It's not a temporary thing. That's just my assumption. But I believe the adaptation will be much faster and will be much greater, inshallah.
Inshallah, Abdurrahman, we all hope so. Not just in the next few months, but hopefully in the next few weeks, this will be all over. And we'll wake up from this nightmare. Patrick, let me move to you. And given that you are a VC who comes from a family office, do you think that family offices now needs to be directly probably involved in mentoring and interacting directly with their startups, or not necessarily?
Hussein, typically family offices are very traditional, very conservative, especially in the Far East and somewhere like Hong Kong, Singapore. The family offices tend to always invest in the more traditional real estate and simpler like private equity IPO kind of deals. I think not just family office, but from my own personal point of view, venture capitalists have to take up more responsibility, be it like in a way like an activist VC, where they have to handhold, they have to babysit a bit more, they have to be a lot more patient with the target companies to help the entrepreneurs get to the next stage. And I think from a family office standpoint, we are a lot more diverse and dynamic, that we act more like a VC than a traditional family office. We look at all stages of investment, from seed, startup, venture capital, all up to IPO. We particularly look at VC early stage projects. Just to give you an example, we invested in a company called Pulse Evolution Group about 2 years ago. We merged with a German listed company called Nextway, which does chatbots and selling software. And then recently, about a month ago, just before COVID-19 sort of locked down the world, we merged with a live streaming company called Fubo TV in the US, and that's sports streaming. So you can see along the way of the investment, we've been very strategic and opportunistic, that you have to keep changing with the times. And now, we've almost got to up to $1 billion valuation. And now, because of COVID, it's ended up being a blessing in disguise that more people are watching, more people are paying. And, the sums of all the different components of the project is now much greater. So you have to still be very opportunistic and just, seize the opportunities where it comes by. So I think family office is the same as venture capital. You have to evolve with the time. So from our perspective, we would continue by adapting to, what's in front of us.
Thank you, Patrick. Abdullah, so what I've heard from many of our speakers, that they are willing to invest in startups at this stage. Have you approached any VC now? And if you did, what was the response that you got?
Well, actually, I believe that VCs are willing to invest. However, when you look at the majority of the investments that did go through during the past 2 months, I believe that Najla touched base on this issue. VCs are investing in companies which are already in their portfolio companies. So it's a kind of like an emergency funding to make sure that these startups do manage to get through this current situation that we're facing. When it comes to Fionca and our fundraising process, Our process has been going on before the COVID-19, and actually we took it was a kind of a stumbling block, and we did face some issues which came in hand with these problems. For example, one of the VCs which were participating in our round had a 5-month investment freeze across all their investments. So you do face some issues. However, thankfully we were able to get past this. Something which I believe has to be highlighted is the fact that startups at a certain stage, startups which are pretty early, so let's say seed stage startups, which have not been previously funding, these are the startups which are most vulnerable. And I believe that from being in the ecosystem, I believe that these startups are in dire need of help, not just financially, probably even mentorship, other types of help, because when you look at the ecosystem, I believe most of the help is coming to startups which are already in a strong place.
Great, Abdullah. Thank you very much. I think it's time now for the Q&A, and I can see so many questions. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to take all of them. But let me try to pick some questions. Najla, if there's any question that you are interested in answering it, just go straight away. Najla, can you just unmute, please?
Yes, sorry. I'm just taking a look now, so I'll let you know if there are any that I can answer. Okay.
In the meanwhile, Tim, I think you were looking at the question, and there's still a couple of questions for you. Anyone you're interested in answering it? Tell Najla.
Well, somebody asked about how global family offices are thinking about moving from traditional asset classes to more digital ones. And is there a system for doing that? Is there a specific approach you would recommend? Yeah, I would walk, as I would for any investment, I'd walk very carefully. And I would either go indirect through venture capital, or I would go, or I would build out a team to go direct. But you have to be very, you have to move very carefully if you're in traditional asset classes. If you're in, the travel business and all of a sudden it's gone to zero, I think you can be, I think you can move a little more quickly, but you don't want to lose your base. So sometimes people just make these crazy decisions for their families and they move just too quickly and too much. It's usually better to just start making a few decisions and then learn from those decisions. I'm fortunate in that I can lose half my investments. So I take risks that other people might not want to take. And knowing that I can lose half of them gives me the courage to go ahead and try a few things that may or may not work out. And so I will go ahead and jump in, but I'll usually jump in with a small check. And then I learn so much. The moment the check is cleared, all of a sudden I learn everything there is to know about the company. And so I often will make small check bets in a lot of different things. And then I will concentrate my investments in companies that are doing, that clearly are doing things that are going to make a big impact on the world long term. I'll let somebody else answer a question now.
Sure, Tim. Sure. Najla?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look at that. So there are so many questions, by the way. It's great to see such an engaged audience.
If you want, I will ask you this question from Edna Trainer. She's asking, what the key criteria in terms of investment? How do you know a good one from a bad one? Or do you take the risk and spread the investment and hope for a big winner among many?
I think the home run approach is probably what is used by a lot of VCs. For us, we're very early stage, and often when entrepreneurs come to us, they have maybe a validated idea, maybe an MVP, but rarely any traction. So at that point, it's really more the entrepreneur that we base our assessment on rather than the idea itself. But that said, in general, I think, when you are presenting to a VC, I think one thing now that you'll probably see that has changed in general, I think, in the ecosystem, and probably VCs are on the panel are, better equipped to speak about this, is that there's a lot more focus now on healthy unit economics. It used to be growth at any cost. And I think there's a lot more focus now on the fundamentals, on retention, on recurring revenue, on making sure that you have a path to profitability. So I think, especially for those who are kind of in that, let's say, Series A sweet spot that a lot of VCs are looking at, I think those are some of the fundamentals that would be looked at. But for us, like I said, as an accelerator, we're much earlier stage. And so 80% of our assessment is really based on the entrepreneur or the founding team. Let's say you'd want to see a team with complementary skill sets, as well as a team that really understands the scope and the scale of the problem that they're solving.
Thank you, Najla. Great. I think there was also a question for Fiorenzo. I'm just not getting it now. Fiorenzo, there was some questions with, I think, with regard with the cryptocurrencies.
Let me just add, because I just saw a couple of questions. I saw one on contact tracing, if I think on wearables, and another on VR, and a lot of questions on whether you would invest in different technologies, biotech, and so on. And I think absolutely. I think emerging technologies, maybe as a region, we had paid a lot of lip service to them, but had never really fully engaged with them. And I think you're going to see that change now. So I think it's an exciting time to be approaching, investors and corporations with these technologies. And certainly for us, like I said, the Startup Solidarity Fund that we announced, we do want to allocate a significant portion of that to go to some of these innovative ideas that are, like I said, either directly addressing the pandemic or will be relevant post-COVID. So again, I would encourage you to get in touch if you have some of these technologies in mind.
Hussein, there's an interesting question here for all panelists from the UK, and the question goes, what I'm hearing is really focused on opportunities for profit with human benefit as a secondary outcome. This is the old world with some nice lipstick. Does anyone have a proposal for a truly new paradigm where the human outcome is the primary pursuit, with profit and natural consequence to success?
In my experience, I have found that it is the most profitable companies that do the most for society, for humanity. And I mean, think of what Google has done for the world. I mean, if they've opened the world's minds to rather than somebody going and saying, I'm going to help drill a well in the Congo. Google has made it so everybody in the Congo can look on their smartphone and figure out how to drill their own well. I think that when a company is not profitable, they are not doing anybody any favors, because if you can't make money, you can't spread the good word around the world. Think of what Amazon has done for the world. Think about Uber, what they've done for the world, Skype, Zoom. These companies are doing extraordinary things for the world, and they're all doing it to make a profit. And in making a profit, they're extending their reach to the rest of the world. So I've heard this many times. Well, wait, what about the NGO nonprofit sector, and what can they do? I look at them as two sides of the same coin. An NGO or a nonprofit should also figure out how to become profitable, how to become sustainable, or they are not doing any favors for anyone. So I've done all of this rationalizing throughout my life, and I realize that an entrepreneur who is going for a profit is the best thing we've got going in this world. And whatever I can do to support them, more power to them. It's progress, it's sustainability. It'll be the entrepreneur that cures the global warming. It's going to be the entrepreneur that cures cancer. It's going to be the entrepreneur that makes sure we're all fed and clothed and housed, and it's going to be the entrepreneur that gets us off this planet. So I am a true believer in the entrepreneur, and I've gone through I've done many things with nonprofits and NGOs and many things with for-profit companies. And boy, the biggest impact I've had throughout my entire career has been in supporting great entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much. And sorry, Hussein, there's just 2 more questions here for Fiorenzo, which is question to Fiorenzo. Which of all countries do you think will be more open to using cryptocurrency in normal day-to-day transactions? And then this is followed by, what do you think about investment with new line cryptocurrency exchange in the Middle East?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, we should differentiate between countries that are, I would say, blockchain friendly and countries that are crypto friendly, I always like to take the example of China, which for me, it's an amazing example in the use of blockchain technology. So what we're seeing in China is something amazing. So the problem that we had in Europe was that, we started using blockchain on a C2C level, as I told you before. So we got confused and we got many scams. The approach of China was in reality more a governmental approach. So the idea was we try to do it at the government level. We try to test it. Once we have a clear application, once we know how to do it, once we control all the risk, we can implement it to the public. So to answer to the first question, I would say on the blockchain application and what is also Internet of Things application, I think China is definitely in advance. What is about, crypto in general, I would say Switzerland, it's one of the fantastic places to be because obviously we have a clear regulatory path. Switzerland, Liechtenstein are very nice place if you want to set up any crypto related projects. In terms of the Middle East, I think it's a fantastic space as well, because as you know, apart of Middle East being a young country, so where we have, average age, which is extremely low, so which means all those people are tech native and digital native. We can see that, as was mentioned before by Sultan Ali, there is a big space into digital banking, and actually those blockchain applications can have a real impact in simplifying all the financial services in the Middle East.
Great, thank you. Then we have a question to all panelists, and that is very simply, what is your take on ESG principles incorporated in investment funds?
So I think we have to assign these questions to one of the speakers. We still have Abdulrahman, Sultan, Patrick.
Let's do Patrick.
Yeah, so ESG is very important. I think I agree with what Tim just mentioned. When people use their heart and passion to get something done, then they do it to the best ability. And that's when people don't think about it's because of the money, because of fame or power or whatever. It's you want to do something great and you want to do something that you're proud of. And once you've done that, then the profits and so on will come after that. Now in the current crisis, we've seen a lot of family, friends, some people have been they're split up in different parts of the world. But more importantly, we know that family is the most important, human life is the most important. And once we protect those two things, then profits will come naturally thereafter. So the sustainability part is very important, where if you're able to maintain a happy, healthy family life, then you're able to next have the next part, which is your business life or the entrepreneur part of it. So the ESG element is more, it's ingrained into the business. It's a way of life. So there's no need to deliberately think about we have to add ESG into it because of COVID. ESG has always been part of living and always been part of doing business. So from our perspective in our family office, we do the thing where we don't believe it's work. It's just a part of who we are, and that's how we live our lives.
Thanks, Patrick. Vanessa, I think we can still just take one more question.
One more question? Okay, fantastic. Well, in this case, we have one for Sultan. Sultan, the question goes like this. 80 to 90% of the food in the UAE is imported into the country, and a handful of hydroponic farms have evolved in the recent times in the UAE, trying to match up the supply floor of the demand that we have. So the question is, what is the future, in your opinion, of these other ways of growing food supply in the UAE? And what are your thoughts also of Vietnam and the food supplies and the way food supplies are developed in Vietnam?
Talking about UAE, it's actually a nation approach. The nation is taking a very serious approach when it comes to food security. So the nation is supporting initiatives when it comes to having their own food supply within the nation itself. As you see now on COVID, most of the nations, they found problems in food supply due to the fact of the logistics problems, and people who had the proper food security programs, they did not face that problem a lot. So the nation itself is supporting this. The nation supports entrepreneurs who want to invest or to start a project related to food security through the industrial bank, I assume. So it's an approach that the nation is taking, which means that it's a huge space of development even for investors. Why I'm focusing on Vietnam? I'm focusing on Vietnam. Vietnam is the gate of Asia. It's the fastest growing economy in Asia. When it comes to food, it's an agriculture country. I'm looking at Vietnam as a businessman. So if I invest in Vietnam, I have my know-how on the market there. I know what I can do. And I've been doing trading since 2014, especially in food and beverages. Vietnam has a huge potential when it comes to food production and food investments. They are scaling up now. Previously it was farmers. Now they're becoming more organizational investments. So that's why I'm investing in Vietnam. Vietnam is a promising country, and I think from my point of view, investing there will create a change in that area.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sultan, and thanks to all of you who participated in this panel today. It was really fascinating, aspiring, and it gave us some more hope getting through this pandemic. So I really appreciate the time you spent with us today, and sorry for the many answers that we could not get back to you with, but you can still get in reach with the speakers through LinkedIn or other social platforms. So thank you again very much, and Vanessa, back to you.
Thank you so much. And Sir Anthony, our chairman, Sir Anthony Ritossa, thank you so much for everything that you do, for crossing bridges between the East and the West, and for bringing exceptional families and entrepreneurs and thought leaders together. Is there something you would like to share with our audience of 1,000 attendees before we say goodbye to everyone?
Thank you. Thank you to each of the esteemed panelists and Hussein as well for making all this happen. It's been really exciting, and especially in a time to give back like this to everyone. So thank you everyone who's dialed in around the world as well. So
thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And just to let everyone know that our next panel will be on real estate on June the 2nd. So invitations will be sent out for that. And keep your eyes glued on our upcoming conferences in Monaco and also in Riyadh in October, as well as in Dubai in December. And again, on behalf of our dear chairman, Anthony Ritossa, thank you all very much for attending this webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.